Hello, welcome back to the Red Devils Den podcast. This is going to be mainly transfer related, so probably one of the more unique ones we've done so far. We're going to be taking some of your questions from Twitter as well. So, United Optimist is first. What is United's most essential thing to do in this window and why? Dan, do you want to go first?
I think firstly, it's finally wrap up the Jadon Sancho deal. It's something that's been on the cards for 2 years, maybe even longer. I think we was even interested in when he was leaving the City Academy. I think we as a fan base need that, and obviously the squad as well. We've spoken at length on here about what he's going to bring to the squad and why it's such a good idea. But as well, because of how the season ended, I think, I think we as United fans need a real positive, need a boost really. Like we need a real good window, and he'd be the perfect way to kick it off, I feel. I just think that it gets all really, really excited for the new season. And obviously the squad holes that it will fix as well and what it will bring to it. So Jadon Sancho is a massive, massive one for me this summer.
Yeah, I agree. To be honest, I think probably at least half of us going to say Jadon Sancho. I'd say Jadon Sancho as well. What would you say, Vin?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because obviously everyone knows that Jadon Sancho getting a right winger is pretty important for us. But I also feel that getting a defensive midfielder is equally important, if not more, with regards to our overall team structure. Because let's be honest, we can't have McTominay and Fred playing week in week out as good players as they are individually. We can't have them playing as a pivot week in week out, and it also kind of restricts the way we play, and it makes us kind of predictable because you know that with those two players sitting in front of the defense, it's going to be a bit messy playing from the back, winning the ball, and it's going to be quite predictable. And although getting Jadon Sancho does help us sort of diversify our distribution of attacking play, but I feel that having a single defensive midfielder helps us to experiment even more. It helps us to play 2 8s. It helps us to play a defensive midfielder and say a free-flowing attacking central midfielder as well. So there are many formations that we can sort of exploit, and so I would be interested to see if we do eventually go for a defensive midfielder. So far, we haven't heard anything as such. So let's hope after the Sancho deal gets wrapped up, we get to hear more of that.
What would you say, Daniel? Would you say Sancho
Yeah.
as midfielder?
Yeah, the bigger kind of thing is that the club need to back the manager. The way they do that is through getting Sancho, but yeah, that's because Ole wants him. But yeah, the bigger premise is backing the manager. We've just got second place after third the previous year. We're doing well. If when Ole gets given his targets, he's shown that he can achieve things with them. He's improving the players he got. So reward that, give him the tools to try and go that step further. And we know that that he wants Sancho. We know that he wants Trippier. Get the deals done, and so that's the kind of thing. We need to back the manager and get him the tools to take the next step.
Yeah, for sure. Last but not least, Resurgent, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I would say that if we're speaking in a meta sense, the most important thing we can do this window would be to have John Murtaugh and Darren Fletcher prove themselves that they're an improvement on the old regime of Ed Woodward and Matt Judge when it comes to negotiating transfers, getting all these first choice targets in before preseason. Because what we've seen is in the past 2 windows under Ollie, last year, Ollie didn't get any of his first choice targets. He had to settle for second options. And then in the first window, we got Harry Maguire, but we signed him, I think it was 3 or 4 days before the first match of the season. So it's one of those things where if we can get signings done quickly and efficiently and get the first choice targets, that would speak more than any individual player could. If we're talking about positions on the pitch, I would agree with Vin and say defensive midfielder, which is funny because I think it's the least likely position we sign, but I do think it's the most important in the sense that we have Mason Greenwood to play on the right. We have Aaron Wan-Bissaka at right back. We have Victor Lindelof at center back. When it comes to defensive midfielders, McTominay is not really a natural in that position. He's more of an 8. Fred is the same. Nemanja Matic is obviously a natural defensive midfielder, but his legs have gone. He can't play that role on a regular basis. So we just have a lack of players in the position. So I would say that's the biggest one we could possibly address.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So on Jane Sancho, so according to Sport Build and Patrick Berger, we've made a 70 million euro bid for Jane Sancho. And I know Romano's come out and said we've agreed personal terms as well. So Dan, do you think the deal is close at all? When do you think it'll get done, if at all?
Well, it's all positive sides. I think where we are now with the transfer is closer, if not as close as we were throughout the whole of the last transfer window. The personal terms being agreed. The bid's gone in. Although I don't think you call it a bid. I think you have to be fairly careful about how you read these things. I think it's more of a proposal, and given that it's sort of common knowledge now. You have to assume that the journalist is slightly behind. So maybe that was one of a few proposals that was rejected, and there's another one in the works that may be up for negotiation, and they're just sort of arguing over a few £1 million. You just don't know. I do feel this deal will be done, but I did think it will be done last year as well. But considering the window opened days ago, and we're here already, is really positive signs how it's accelerated this much, even before transfer window opened, personal terms being discussed, they're now agreed. There's some kind of proposals going in. There's a real intent to get this deal done. And maybe it's accelerated because of the Euros, because Southgate doesn't want any negotiation going on with that. Or maybe we're actually taking Dortmund's deadline. Sorry, maybe we're actually taking Dortmund's deadline seriously this year, because obviously we called their bluff last year, and it ultimately did not work out. We look like mugs. So I'm really positive about it. Maybe we'll see some more things come out this evening, or possibly even tomorrow. I'm very, very excited though.
Vin, do you think that the deal is close? Who do you sort of believe on, whether negotiations are they deep into negotiations, or do you think it's sort of just starting?
Yeah, I think we're close. Obviously, reports have come out today saying that we stood for approximately £70 million, 70 million euros, which obviously is far from what Dortmund are demanding. They're demanding around 1995. The thing is, I think it was a few days ago. I think all of us were talking about reports of an 80 plus 20 sort of a structure, and coincidentally, we're still with 20 million away. And in the report that was said a few days ago, it said that 20 millions could be in the form of add-ons plus bonuses. So I've got a snarky feeling that this 20 million valuation that we're far off from Dortmund's demand could just be the form of add-ons and bonuses that they're trying to work out. And the thing is that with the likes of what I've noticed with the likes of Romano and what I've noticed with the likes of other journalists is that they don't report on the nitty-gritties. They only report when the official bid has come out, and they only tweet. Romano, for example, tweets "Here we go." Especially with regards to Sancho, he only tweets "Here we go" when an official bid has gone in. He's not going to tweet on the underlying proposals that have gone underneath. He's not going to tweet every single proposal that United have sent to Dortmund. Dortmund has sent back saying, "Okay, no, this is what we can sort of work around a bit more with." So. Yeah, and so when he says that negotiations aren't underway, or that United haven't started official talks with Dortmund, it just means that there are unofficial proposals underway. It's just that nothing official has been made just yet, and people just take his words way too seriously. And again, there's a lot of media service going on. Obviously, sources in Germany will try to hype up their price. Sources in England try to lowball their price, sort of suggest that, okay, we're getting a better deal. The sources in Germany are going to say, they're going to try to hike the price and saying, no, Dortmund are getting what they want. So the media circus has been going on for 2 years now. But it seems to me that it might be close now. I think we're not that far away. I think the proposal that was just being quoted today by everyone, I think this is the one that's going to likely get accepted. You might see an increase in the fee, because we notice in the bids of Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, and Bruno, you've had prices being hiked up by at least 10 million more. Like for Maguire, it's been quoted at 95 million. Bruno has been quoted at around 60, and Wan-Bissaka has been quoted at 50 or 55 something. But then eventually, when the deal got accepted, the prices were sort of 10, 15 million lower. and I expect the same case will be for Jadon Sancho.
Yeah, definitely. Daniel, do you think the deal is close at all?
Not close as in the sense of like any day now, but I do feel like it's progressed enough that it's going to happen at some point in the window. I'm not worried at this stage. I feel like the difference in what we're reading about, the difference in asking price is resolvable, and I feel like it will get done this time. I just don't think it's imminent. It just might take a little bit longer.
Yeah, I know there's been a few outlets sort of reporting that, you know, all parties are really more optimistic this summer as well. You know, compared to last summer. I think most people probably expected to get done last summer as well. I know Dan was saying earlier he expected to get done. I did. Most of you probably did. So yeah, it's a good sign that the parties do seem more optimistic this summer. But yeah, Surgeon, what's your opinion? Do you think the deal is close at all?
I don't. I think that this is something that's going to happen in the week after England get knocked out of the Euros or win the Euros. I know some of you will be hoping, but whenever England involvement ends, I think the week after is the time this is going to get done. My thinking, and I've thought that for a long time, that's not something that's been influenced by this report. The reason is if you look at what at Odds on FPL said about the bid, he said he's heard over 70 million euros and add-ons of about 10 million euros on top of that. None of which are guaranteed. And I think that probably does sound like a United opening bid, so I'm inclined to think that's probably the number. Dortmund, per that Athletic report, seemed to want about 90 million euros plus 20 million in add-ons, or 10, 20 million in add-ons. So I think we're probably about 20 million away in the guaranteed fee, and then also maybe 5-10 million off on the add-ons as well. And I think that's the kind of adjustment that typically takes the club about 2-3 weeks to process. I'm sure we'll go up some and try to get them to come down some as much as we can, but I do think the deal will get done. I just think it's not something we can expect in the next week or 10 days. My expectation is when the deal eventually does get done, it'll probably be something around 85, 90 million euros with 10, 15 in add-ons for a total of 100 million euros maximum fee. So that's kind of what I'm expecting here. And I think that's probably about the maximum I'd go to given the situation. Last summer, they said 120 million euros or nothing. There's now 1 year less on his contract. So I think we should get at least 20 million off that, right? So 100 million, including add-ons, is probably the ceiling of what I'd go to. And I think that's probably fair.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get onto that. United Davo actually asked on Twitter, what's the absolute highest you would pay for Jadon Sancho? Dan, what's your opinion on
that? Well, last summer I was more than happy to pay what Dortmund wanted. You know, 120 million or nothing. I was more than happy to pay that because he's probably worth it. You know, not just for now, but you're paying for his potential as well. You know, his goal involvement is ridiculous for a player of his age, and you know he could play at the top level for the next 12 or 13 years if he wanted to. You know, and if he sort of sustained that output, so I was more than happy to pay that. But obviously, given the COVID market, the year of his contract, I think I'm just going to echo what Resurgence said. I think max 100 million euros is fair because, you know, Dortmund have got financial issues for one, which we've learned over the last couple of months. And one thing that is good is, as you were saying earlier about all parties feeling a bit more optimistic, just adding to that, you know, it's been reported by a number of people saying that Dortmund feel more open to actual negotiations this summer, rather than a 120 million or nothing. You know, that actually feels like they're willing to sort of negotiate a fee. They're sort of willing to play ball a bit more rather than you pay this or you don't get him. So the final fee is going to be an interesting one, but I totally agree with all Resurgence points and say 100 million total, including add-ons, is probably a fair price.
Vin, what would your price be?
Yeah, I'd want to get a 25 million discount on the price I was quoted last year. Safe to say, I think, given the fact that Dortmund are in financial difficulty and also the fact that Jadon Sancho does want to come to Manchester United, I think that's a very well-known fact. Again, 1 year off his contract, which means that the price has to be lowered. And I mean, you have to get him, right? I mean, I've seen sources being quoted at 90, some are saying 95, some are saying 100 million is what Dortmund really wants this summer. But the important thing is Dortmund are willing to negotiate, and Dortmund are willing to lower their price down by even like 5 million, right? By 5-10 million of what's being projected. So if Dortmund is saying 100, they're willing to go down as low as maybe 95 or 90, which is good news because it just makes it easier for us to negotiate. So what I would pay for him is I think 95 is a fair price, including add-ons and bonuses. And yeah, just get the deal done.
Yeah, fair enough. Daniel, how high would you go for Jadon Sancho?
Without wanting to reiterate what the others have said too much, I feel like 100 million is about right as a maximum. You can't justify that Dortmund can't justify the 120 million a year from last year, a year later into his contract. So yeah, 100 million feels kind of a reasonable compromise as a maximum.
There is also symbolic value in the 100 million euro figure. If you look at it, that converts to about 86, 87 million pounds. And our transfer record is 89 million pounds for Paul Pogba. The club are not going to want to break that in the middle of a pandemic. So I think the most likely situation is that is probably our ceiling as well.
Yeah, I think sort of makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Moving on. Mundo Deportivo reported United have had a 12 million euro bid for Kieran Trippier rejected. And Athletic Group supposedly want 40 million euros. So, Dan, do you think do you think it would be a good signing for 40 million euros, or do you think perhaps you go a bit less?
I don't know how much I agree with that report. I think 40 million euros is a fucking shitload of money for Kieran Trippier, to be honest. He's well into his 30s. He wants to come back to
He's
England.
just 30, just to be clear.
Sorry?
He's only 30. He's not well into his 30s.
Did I say well into his 30s? I didn't mean to say that. I apologise. But, for a player of his age, he's not going to come in and be probably starting every week. He's going to be playing with Aaron Wan-Bissaka. That's far too high. I feel I would love it to come to the club. I really rate him as a player. He's very good. He's be a very good attacking option. He can he's good at set pieces and he can take a free kick. So I would love him to come to the club. But that's a massive chunk of our transfer budget this summer. Considering that we're obviously very likely to have less to spend than we usually would. So, if you go out and you say you spend 100 million euros on Sancho, you spend 40 million euros on Trippier, that's 140 million euros. That's got to be most of the budget this summer. And then considering the fact that we also want a centre half and potentially a midfielder as well, so that's got to be nearly all the transfer budget. So I don't think that would be a good deal, no. And I think that's a ridiculous fee.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's an element of obviously Madrid. They can demand what they want if they want to keep the player. But obviously 40 million a year is probably too much, definitely. Vin, you probably wouldn't pay 40 million, would you? What do you think?
No, I think 40 million is a bit too much, too steep. That was quoted by Fabrizio, wasn't it? The 40 million.
Then him and Mundo Deportivo in their report where they said that the bid was rejected, they also said 40 million was the asking price.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not surprised because Atletico, they've just won the league. They won the title, so they want to keep the player. They can price him at whatever amount they want, really. But if you think about it, if Trippier does want to push the move, he can. Although it doesn't seem like he's a player who would want to push the move. I think he's respectful in that way. But one thing that may sort of lower the price amount is the Brexit situation, which I've just sort of read about, which is that post-Brexit rules, Atletico, in the form of Trippier, would be occupying a foreign squad, which may prove to be financially, a bit expensive for them. So if they do want to offload Trippier, they may have to do it at a lower price, which may tempt the likes of Manchester United to be involved in the deal. And so if a deal does. I mean, Athletic quoted that around 15 million should do 15, 20 million should do it, but Fabrizio and Deportivo have come out saying 40 million. So I expect if a deal does eventually happen, I expect it would be around 20 million-ish, which I think is a fair price, given that he's 30, he's about to turn 31 in around September. He would be a good right back addition to Wan-Bissaka, and at the same time, it doesn't hinder the progress of the likes of Laird and even say Brandon Williams, who I assume would be going out for loan this season. I hope. So yeah, 25 million, that would be a fair price, but nothing more than that.
I think something that would be useful to the listeners. Does anyone know the exact situation with this Brexit thing? Because I know I don't. I did see the report, but I haven't had a chance to read it. So if anyone actually knows what that is, I think that would be really helpful.
So to what I've read, the situation is in La Liga, you have 2 non-EU player spots that you're allowed to use. And Atletico, as of, I think it's July 1st, the players who are from England, because obviously England's no longer part of the European Union, will be counted as non-EU players. That was supposed to come in on January 1. They had negotiated to push it back to July 1st. So as of July 1st, once Trippier becomes a non-EU player, Atletico will have 3 non-EU players because they have Felipe and they have Renan Lodi as well. And so when you have Trippier, that makes 3, and they're only allowed 2, so they have to sell one of them. That's seemingly what the situation is per that report, at least.
Yeah, good overview there. Daniel, would you get Trippier? Would you pay for? Well, how much would you pay as well?
Definitely not 40 million. That's far too much. But yeah, I feel like part of it, if this report is true, is just Atletico trying to jack up the asking price. So if say we offered 10 million and they started at 40, they're trying to make the middle ground higher by suggesting a higher asking price. So yeah, I don't think they're actually expecting 40 million. I think they're just trying to raise the eventual middle ground that we find. So yeah, I think that's what's happening. But yeah, I think he'd be a great signing. His age kind of works out really well with Laird's development. Yeah, so I hope we get this one done without being absolutely fleeced for him.
Yeah, that's fair enough. The surgeon, I just think you give your opinion on Trippier. Did you? What would you say about him?
Yeah, so he's a player that I've wanted for some time. I'm quite happy for us to sign him, but obviously not for 40 million euros. He is 30, as Dan brought up, and the way I look at it is you can't pay an excessive fee for a 30-year-old, especially when there are younger options available. So when I looked at it, if we bid 12 and 40 is the asking price, the halfway ground would be 26 million euros, which is just above 20 million pounds, which I think is the maximum of what I'd go to. If Atletico want anything more than that, then I think you are now in the price range where you start looking at Zeki Çelik, the Turkish right back from Lille. You look at Max Aarons from Norwich, right? So there's plenty of options, I think, in that upper 20 million pound, low 30 million pound bracket who have that similar attacking profile. Maybe not quite as experienced, but you can get players who are a lot younger, and that'll give you longevity and more value for money. So I think about 20 million pounds or 25, 26 million euros is kind of the ceiling of what I'd pay for Trippier. After that, I'm looking at younger targets.
Now I know what you're going to say, but would you call Dalot back because he's a young right back, isn't he?
Well, that depends. Have you ever seen him defend? Because I haven't. I would suggest that he's not really so much a young right back as he is a right wing back or a right winger, almost even in some systems. But I think his ideal position is similar to Ashraf Hakimi, actually, just not nearly as good, playing as a right wing back in a 3 at the back system. And given all he completely retired the 3 at the back formation last season, I just don't see it for him at United. I think it's one of those where it's time for him to go, and that fee will hopefully help us finance a new right back, no matter who it is.
No, I don't exactly want to go around all of you and every single one of you saying now Dalot's rubbish. So is anyone actually a fan of Dalot? Would anyone consider calling him back?
Sorry, Reece, you're on your own.
Okay, we'll move on. United Dara again asks, who would be your main centre-back priority in the transfer window? I think mostly it's been Pau Torres and Varane that we've been linked with, isn't it? What would you say, Dan?
I really do like the idea of Pau Torres. You know, since his name, I mean, before he was mentioned, I have to admit, I don't watch a lot of La Liga. I'd never heard of the guy, but everything I've seen of him so far has really, really impressed me. I think he's just a better version of Lindelof, to be honest. You know, he's probably a better passer. His football brain's brilliant, you know, and you know, he's a lot better in the air. So I would love Pau Torres to come, and he's young, so you know, and there's plenty of time for him to grow. So yeah, that would be probably my number one. Although I do really like Varane. I mean, they've got different qualities. You know, Varane's got his experience and he's, you know, a serial winner. So, but no, that would be my number one. But I mean, centre half probably isn't my forte. And I know Resurgent's about to say something. I just saw his face.
I'm going to have to dispute one thing you said there. As everyone knows, I'm a huge fan of Pau Torres. I've seen a lot of him, but he's not much better in the air than Victor Lindelof. In fact, he might even be a little bit worse. He's plus or minus 5%. Like, you shouldn't expect any huge improvement on Victor Lindelof aerially. The benefit you get with Pau Torres is his intelligence with his positioning, his ability on the ball. So that's kind of more where he thrives. It's not really so much being aerially dominant. If that's what you're looking for, you're more looking for a Varane or a Botman or something like that.
Would you say he's better than Lindelof overall, though? I mean, in the air, there's not much of a
Oh, I
difference,
think broadly speaking, Dan's summary of him is perfect. He is a better Lindelof. He's just not better in the air. He's better at everything else than Lindelof, but aerially he's about the same. He has a wand of a left foot, as we saw in the Europa League final, to our chagrin. He can play the ball kind of through the lines, which is pretty rare for a center back. His positioning is excellent, as we've talked about before. He's very intelligent with when to press, when not to press, which is something that I think Jules Koundé struggles with, who's another target that we've been linked to. And that's one of the reasons why I prefer Torres over Koundé. So I think probably there's no doubt that he's better than Lindelof. The question is he the best we can do, given Fabrizio Romano has been pretty clear that his release clause is 65 million euros, or about 50 million pounds, or a little more than 50 million pounds, which is probably at the upper end of our budget for the position. So there might be more value out there, but there's no doubt that he's a great player.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Vim, who would you pick for your centre back ideally?
Yeah, I think Pau Torres for me. Simply because he's a younger target, and the fact that he's left-footed, which I think adds again an extra dimension and defensive sort of, especially when you're playing from the back. You got Maguire on the ball as a right footer, and then you got Torres on the ball as a left footer. I think that opens up an extra range of passing from the back, which we don't have in our arsenal right now. And so, and I think he's about 55 million. I think that's his release clause that's being reported. So compared to Varane, Real Madrid expect around 60 million. And we also have the likes of PSG and Chelsea involved in the fight for him. So it really is a question of whether do you want experience or do you want someone who's speaking as we speak, right? So with Varane, you're getting an experienced figure, someone who's been there. He's won almost everything that there is to win, and pretty tall centre back, obviously pretty good in the air, decent on the ball as well, I think. I haven't watched much of him, like Dan said, so I wouldn't be the best judge of him. But from what I've seen in Champions League games and from what I've seen when he's played for France, yeah, he seems the centre back that could really fit us. But at the same time, we also have to look at it from a financial perspective. And so if Pau Torres sounds better to us financially and both playing on the pitch, then I think we should go for Torres. And that's who I would go for.
Daniel, who would your centre back be ideally?
I look at it at a slightly different perspective in that I want a centre back of a certain profile. So I think that a good partnership has one player who brings the ball out from defence, who goes forwards and is the more proactive defender, and then you have the cover defender. We have the proactive defender in Maguire, so now we need to sign a specialist cover defender. So Varane has done that for years with Ramos, who steps out. I don't want Koundé personally, because from what I've seen profile-wise, he seems to be the one who steps out more, and I feel like the balance wouldn't be there with Maguire. With Maguire. So then for, it's for different reasons, but that then leaves Varane and Torres as my two options. I don't want Koundé because I don't think the partnership would be right with Maguire.
So, would you take Varane or Pau Torres?
I guess it would just depend on the asking prices. Like if Real Madrid are prepared to negotiate, if Villarreal will accept below their release clause, it would depend on the prices, I guess, because we have other targets that we need, and you can't just pay whatever they ask, and then you don't have enough money to get another signing. You've got to work it out in the bigger picture. So it would just depend on the asking price.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think before we move on, I would go with Varane because I think with the amount of experience he's got, Champions League, World Cups, La Ligas, other trophies, I think you've got to have that in the squad because he'd probably be the most decorated player in the squad. I think those sort of experiences, would be invaluable. But I think
Well, I think it's an interesting one, really, because I mean, if you go for Varane, you do have that experience. But if you go for Torres, you have got, you've got potentially a world-class centre half, and he's got plenty of room to develop. But I think obviously, whatever happens, we've got to do something about these set pieces in the summer. A set piece has probably got to be on the agenda. And, perhaps the thinking behind Varane, obviously, he's a top-class centre half, but are they looking at Varane for that experience to get away with, perhaps not appointing a set piece coach? Or I feel like if you bring in Pau Torres, you definitely have to bring a set piece coach. But if you bring in Varane, you still definitely have to bring in one. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, set piece coach is going to be absolutely essential. What I will say is, while I was describing center backs earlier, I think I didn't really give my opinion on it. I would probably say Varane is ideal if the wages get more reasonable. I'm not worried about the asking price, 55, 60 million euros. It seems like Koundé, Varane, and Torres are all within 5-10 million of each other. So I'm not really worried about the transfer fee. What worries me is I saw a report that Varane, I can't remember, it might have been Muppeteers or something, or it might have been a more reliable or more journalistic source, but I'm not sure where I saw it. It was a day or two ago that Varane wants well over 300K a week, which I would not be willing to do. I think he's on about 190, 150, something like that at Madrid. If he wants 250, he's more than welcome to come. If he wants, Pogba's currently on 290. If he wants kind of that or more, then I'd very easily be willing to pass on him in favor of someone else. And so I'd say probably from what I've seen, Pau Torres would be a good second option then. But again, with Pau Torres, it's about the release clause and whether or not we can afford it. Given that we're going to be spending money on Jadon Sancho, it seems like Fabrizio Romano's suggestion is we're going to spend on Sancho, and then based on the money left over, we'll decide who the center back target is. Among the leftover center back targets we could look at, if we didn't have quite the money for a Varane or a Torres, I would say keep an eye on Christian Romero at Atalanta and on Sven Botman from Lille. Lille are having a fire sale. They sold Boubakary Soumare for about £20 million, which is phenomenal value. So I'm sure they would let Botman go for 25, 30, which is, he's an excellent player. I mean, I wasn't super impressed when I watched him play against Ajax myself, but then I looked into the numbers and I talked to people who've seen him more than I have. And what they've suggested and what the numbers say is he's tremendously progressive with the ball, which was my main concern with him against Ajax. And against Ajax, he was aerially dominant. He was like their Harry Maguire. So, and he's left-footed. So I think there's a lot of value in him. And then Romero was voted the best defender in Serie A. And then if you look at his numbers with regards to aerials won, he's, I think, in the 93rd percentile from FBref, so that's pretty fantastic. And I watched him play against Juventus in the final of the Coppa Italia last month, and I thought he was fantastic, apart from one mistake, which is pretty similar to what I saw from Pau Torres, honestly. So I think those are kind of the four names that I would keep an eye on. It's just relating to finances really more than anything, what's feasible. I wouldn't pay a center back much more than what we pay Harry Maguire. You can't be paying a center back 350K a week. It's just not possible.
I think the report mentioned that he wanted the same money that, or similar to what David Alaba was on, wasn't it? I think that's what I read anyway.
That might have been it, and that was $412K a week, which is absurd. Like we can't do that.
Didn't he only get that? He only got that because he was obviously a free transfer, wasn't it? So.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll end it there for now, and we'll come back in a second. Okay, so according to, well, really several sources, United are in talks to keep Grant and Juan Mata. So, Daniel, do you think we should keep Grant and Juan Mata?
Short answer first, no, and then to explain what I mean. Mata, at the stage of his career is at, he's not going to get any real game time. We're hoping to get Sancho. We have Ahmad, who's now settled in. He's going to have an increasing number of minutes. There simply isn't going to be the time for Mata to play. And while I understand the argument of he's a really positive influence to have around the training ground, he's on something like 140K a week. You can't have someone on that much just for that. So yeah, I think we just need to let him go. And as for Grant, I would happily have him on the coaching staff as one of the members, but I don't see any real benefit of giving him another contract as a player. I just can't see it. We're signing Heaton for the experienced goalkeeper backup. We really don't need Grant. So yeah, for him, my only idea of a new contract I'd accept is him joining the coaching staff.
Yeah, well, with potentially probably De Gea leaving, do you think Grant could just continue to be that third choice keeper, Daniel?
Well, that kind of depends on who you believe as to the role that Heaton's been signed as. Has he been signed as the second choice, or has he been signed as the third choice? Nobody inherently seems to know the answer to that. And if he's been signed as the third choice, then obviously you don't need Grant because Heaton's taking that role. But if he's signed as the second choice, then I can at least see the argument, even though I'd rather not have him sign a new contract.
Yeah, fair enough. Dan, what do you think about that? Grant and Mata, would you extend their contracts?
I totally agree with what Daniel said about Grant. I think it's a very strange one if you have after a contract, unless De Gea is sort of set on leaving. Because if he is, if Heaton's coming in as the third choice, then we don't need Lee Grant, do we? Unless he is on the coaching staff, because apparently that is what he has been doing in and around the training ground. So yeah, I think Grant's a really strange one. As far as Juan Mata, I think everybody loves Juan Mata because of the type of person he is. And it's a weird one because, whether the club sort of offered him a contract just because of how long he's been with us and what he's done, and they just sort of want to give him that last contract to end his career. I don't know. I think it's very, very strange. As I said, he's not going to get a lot of minutes. The only reason that seems plausible is that he is a positive influence and he's got experience of winning things and he's good for the dressing room. But as Daniel mentioned, that's a lot of money for a cheerleader, isn't it? So I would love to keep him in and around the club just because of who he is and how he is. But in and around the squad, it just seems strange. I mean, I'm sure they can find him a role with a bit of a reduced salary, but I don't see any sense in keeping him on as a player.
I mean, to be fair to Juan Mata, at the start of the season, I mean, he got Player of the Month, didn't he? And then, he was actually on a really good run, starting in the Premier League even. I know he started that game against Everton when people were saying, he was going to be sacked. He won that. But then, he had that issue with his mother passing away, and then, he wasn't available for months. So, I don't know. Do you think he could sort of have a role in the squad to, which is sort of more than just a squad player? What do you think, Vin?
Yeah, I mean, again, like Dan and Daniel have said, he's definitely a positive influence to have in the dressing room, an experienced figure, someone whom the young kids can sort of go to, for advice and just to seek help on maybe certain math situations or whatever, right? So he's an experienced figure. It's always good to have someone in the dressing room who's level-headed, who's calm, and who helps people around him. But again, the wage is definitely an issue. I mean, if you're paying 140K for what is essentially a senior advisor, I mean, that's really not worth it, is it? So again, we don't know what the terms of negotiations are at this point. We'll have to wait and see as more details come out. We don't know if he's definitely getting a 1 year extra contract, which could be his final one. There were talks of him moving into coaching or moving to into an ambassador role sometime back, but again, we have no idea how much truth there is to these reports. As for Lee Grant, I think he's moving to a coaching role. I don't think he's going to be there as a player as such. So I guess that's why he's in the retention list. But I think the retention list is not like the final ultimate list for the season. So again, a lot more developments could happen over the course of these couple of months. We will just have to wait and see. But ideally, I wouldn't mind seeing Grant in a coaching role. And as for Mata, if you can sort of water down his wages a bit, good. That's fine with me. But if not, then I think we should move on to that.
Yeah, fair enough. Surgeon, what's your opinion on it? Grant and Mata, would you sign them a new contract? Or
Okay, so I'm going to split the two of them because my opinion on them is very different. I'm going to start with Lee Grant. For me, I'm happy to keep Lee Grant on as the third goalkeeper. The way I look at it is David De Gea will probably go, and I think Henderson, Heaton, and then Grant is probably a perfectly functional 1-2-3 as far as goalkeepers goes. So I'm quite happy to keep Lee Grant among the playing staff. And then obviously third goalkeeper is effectively a semi-coaching role anyways. So he would do a lot of coaching as well, but I'm happy to have him as the third goalkeeper and Heaton as number 2. So that's fine by me. When it comes to Juan Mata, I want him to go. I love Juan Mata. He's one of the nicest people in football. I got a signed book of his from the club on one of the Twitter contests about a year ago. So like I said, he's one of the nicest people around, and I love him. He's one of the first United kits that I still have lying around. At least I got someone as a kid, but one of the more recent ones that I still have lying around is Mata 8 from Louis van Gaal's first season. So I've got a lot of positive memories associated with Juan Mata, but ultimately I think it's time to move on. I think Donny van de Beek can play more minutes out centrally if Juan Mata leaves. I think that Ahmad and Shola Shoretire and Elanga can get more minutes out wide potentially if Juan Mata leaves. And if we're not going to use him at all really as a player, which is what I would want to do, then I don't really see the point of keeping him as a cheerleader. We have enough experience in the squad with Nemanja Matic, Harry Maguire, Tom Heaton, Lee Grant, potentially. We've got Edinson Cavani, Fred and Alex Telles are more experienced players as well. So I really don't think there's a dearth of experience that would mean, oh, let's pay him even 50K a week to keep him around. I think ultimately it's time to move on. The relationship has run its course, and I'm happy to have him around as an ambassador or a coach if he wants to do that. But as far as a playing contract goes, I would be very much against giving Juan Mata a new deal.
yeah, okay, that's fair enough. So moving on then, this person's Twitter username is long, so I'll just call him Sammy. He asks if we can't get a right wing centre back or a defensive midfielder. Oh yeah, sorry, I totally forgot. Daniel had something to add. Then you go on quick.
It doesn't really change a huge amount. It just kind of emphasizes our points even more. My saying that he was on 140K was actually an underestimate. I just checked while other people are talking, and he's actually on 160K. So it just emphasizes everyone's points even more.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry about that. So, Sammy, he asked if you can't get a right wing centre back or a defensive midfielder, which position would you spend on? What do you think about that, Vin?
Wait, did you mention a right winger, centre back, or a defensive midfielder? So you have to pick one of the three, right?
No, you have to pick something other than the three. The idea is those are the three everyone talks about. If you can't spend on those, what would you spend the money on?
Oh, okay. A backup right back and a striker. I mean, those are the only two positions remaining that we really need to fill, because everywhere else, if you look, we've got positions, we've got options. It's slotted over there. So, yeah, definitely a striker. go for, I guess, Kane or Haaland, fight with Chelsea for 150 million. Either ways, for both of them, it's going to be 150 million. Either ways. So whether you fight Chelsea for Haaland or whether you fight, I guess, Man City for Kane, so it's your choice. And then get a right back in Trippier. Yeah.
Dan, what would you say in terms of that?
Nothing to add. Vin took the words out of my mouth. It's got to be. It's the only two positions that you could strengthen if you weren't strengthening any of three. I think that's a really, really hard question, to be honest. Is there an option of doing up Old Trafford with the cash instead?
Possibly. Daniel, what would you say? If you can't sign those positions, who would you sign?
Other than the ones that Vin mentions, there's an argument for another progressive midfielder, someone good on the ball. So even more so if Pogba were to leave. But I feel like if in this scenario, if you can't get those positions we really need, in this scenario, then we could really do with another great passer of the ball, not just because like if Pogba doesn't play in the pivot, we are lacking that progressive passing. So it would be a decent idea to get someone else in this scenario.
Do you think there's an argument for a striker as well, Daniel?
This summer, then I don't think so. I think we're kind of setting our plans for this summer, but they are obviously only short-term plans with Cavani, for instance. So yeah, I don't think that it's a one we would need to address this summer, but we will need to make a decision next summer, definitely, because Cavani will probably be leaving. We'll have to assess how Greenwood's development's gone. That if Martial doesn't want to be on the bench, he might want to leave. There's lots of variables so striker's probably going to be a big part of our next summer window.
I think the sort of hypothesis we as fans have sort of come to is that we signed Cavani on the one-year deal on the premise that we're going to be well and truly in for Haaland next summer, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. The surgeon, in terms of that question, what would you say?
Okay, so I've got 2 positions and 4 answers, I guess, if that makes sense. But it's going to be quick, so don't worry about it. First of all, I agree with Daniel's idea about the more progressive midfielder, especially as a Pogba replacement. I know a lot of people discuss Saul as a number 6, but I don't think that's his best position. I think he's more of an 8 and would play where Fred is. So I think that would be the easy answer of what would be most beneficial to the team in the short term and what's realistic. If we're talking about a little bit more fantasy type, I don't think you pay 150 million for Kane. I don't think it's good value for money to pay that much for a 28-year-old. And I don't want to ever deal with Mino Raiola, so Erling Haaland's not on my list. I do have 3 strikers in mind, though. One of them is Cristiano Ronaldo.
I can already guess 2 of them.
Ronaldo was one of them, which was an answer, and that's realistically doable. DiMarzio said that he's open for a new adventure this summer. So that's
another one plays for Eintracht Frankfurt.
No, he doesn't actually.
We got someone from Fiorentina. We got someone from Fiorentina.
Dusan Vlahovic, also probably for 40-50 million. And the third name is Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Take advantage of the chaos at Everton with Carlo Ancelotti leaving, who you're supposed to, and go ahead and bring in the long-term number 9. So I would say that those are kind of the guys that I would look at. But like I said, I don't think striker, progressive midfielder, or something that we actually will end up looking at. Those 3 positions we weren't allowed to pick are probably the ones we will be picking from.
Yeah, I mean, with the progressive attacking midfielder, I think it really depends on the Pogba situation. If Pogba does on a new contract, which there are rumors of, by the way, it's pretty clear that, yeah, and if he does decide to leave next year, then I guess then we could invest on getting a second midfielder of that kind of profile next summer along with the striker. But regarding that position, I think I've got like 2 or 3 options. Of course, everyone's talking about Saul Niguez from Atletico Madrid, who seems
there was
to be
that
on the
Turkish
move,
outlet
but
saying today
don't
that
know
we're
where.
preparing a bid for him and they only want about 40 million euros. How true that is, I don't know, but that would be incredible value for money.
What I've read is about 60 million is what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And I would also say Ekram Konur is not very reliable, so I wouldn't really trust that.
Yeah, so there's Saul Niguez, and then there's obviously Florian Neuhaus, which everyone seems to be talking about and hyping up about. So he's definitely one whom you could sort of price out. And then there is my favorite target for that position, which is Milinkovic Savic from Lazio. For
Also
me,
a
he's
very
like
good
the
choice.
ideal profile. He's a pretty good option. I mean, I've been wanting him for the past a year or two now. Ever since there were talks of Pogba leaving, I'm like, if you want get him out, if you want get him out, but get Milinkovic Savic in, because he's the guy who can ideally be the closest replacement to Pogba. So
I
for
think what
me,
we've seen with this conversation more than anything is there's a lot of players you could bring in who are better fit for our system than Paul Pogba.
exactly, yeah. And as for the striker, yeah, I totally forgot Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He's one for me as well to watch out for. Everton seem to be in a mess at the moment. So ideally, if there is any unrealistic opportunity to get him away from Everton, I would say now is the time. Obviously, it's not going to happen. But if we had the funds, if there was a room for another signing, that would be him for me.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Anyone else got anything else to add?
Just that
Okay.
people should keep realistic with their expectations and don't expect United to be bidding aggressively for every player on the market, and don't expect every report from the Sun and the Mirror to be true. Look out for reliable sources, and that way you'll never be misled.
Yeah, and also just don't expect United to just bid whatever every club asks for. I mean, I've just been like tweeting and we talking to a few people who are saying, "Oh, United negotiating. Why are we negotiating? Just pay whatever Dortmund want." I mean, negotiation is a very important, if not the important aspect of a transfer. If you're just gonna end up paying whatever every club wants, you're gonna get ripped off easily for any player whatsoever. It's like if West Ham come in and say, "Oh, Declan Rice is for 90 million, do you want him or not?" and United are like, "Okay, we'll pay 90 million." You're gonna get ripped off because all of us know Declan Rice is not a 90 million player. You have to negotiate. He's more of a 50, 60 million player. So you got to negotiate. You got to use players, add-ons, bonuses, do all of that. And the same thing we're doing with Dortmund. Yes, we know they're stubborn and they don't budge away from what they usually demand. But if there is a scope, if there is some amount of room for negotiations or for compromise, why not utilize it? What's the harm in that? And then I get responses saying, "Oh, look at Chelsea, PSG, City." Well, the difference is they're state-owned and they've got all the money in the world to splash, and they don't mind, wasting a few millions to
It's
get
also not
who they
even
want.
true when people say that. If you look at last summer,
Yeah,
Chelsea wanted to sign Kai Havertz, and the original asking price was 100 million euros. They ended up getting him for about 80. So they do
yeah,
negotiate. That's what they do. The difference is clubs know, and this is over time. This reputation has developed because I remember back when Sir Alex and David Gill were in charge, Spurs wanted 40 million for Dimitar Berbatov, and we know that Daniel Levy is one of the most difficult negotiators in the world, and we were able to get him for I think like 30.75 or something. So we were able
yeah,
to make a difference. What happened was after he retired, both Gil and Sir Alex, we ended up in a position where we've been paying the asking price at the end of the day over and over again. Clubs knew United will never walk away at the last minute, they'll cave. Last summer, we took a step towards changing that as much as we didn't like it. Missing out on Jadon Sancho was part of a longer term plan to make clubs realize United won't pay whatever you ask. You have to be willing to negotiate. And I think at this point, that's the issue that we need to come back to. The club has to be able to negotiate on every deal. We can't pay 40 million for Trippier. We can't pay 85 or 90 million plus 20 million in add-ons for Sancho. We have to make a statement as a club that we will, unless a club's willing to negotiate, we're not willing to engage. And so clubs don't look at us as mugs in the market anymore.
exactly. I mean, look, I get the fact that all of us hate the Glazers and we wish they spent their money much more efficiently and all that, but we also have to understand in the past 7 years we've been ripped off. We've been ripped off a few times, be it with Falcao, be it with Di Maria, be it with Sanchez, and I'm sure there are a few more players which I'm not mentioning right now, and we've been ripped off for them because at the end we've just caved down to whatever they've demanded, and then we've paid over the odds. So I mean, we have to change that narrative. That image has to change, and if it means taking a step back, which we did like last summer, then so be it, right? Because even if you look at Man City, they don't go beyond a certain amount. Like I've never seen any Man City bid go for like 90 million for any player. They don't bid above
Yeah.
85. That's far as I know. And I would be very surprised if they bid like 150 for Harry Kane. I'm sure they try to dilute it down by adding a few players or maybe a few bonuses here and there. But they're not going to bid for anything beyond 85. PSG are the only ones who bid over the odds for every player in the world. They're the ones who've come in and changed essentially the transfer market in the whole of Europe. So
Yeah, I
if
think
you
the
want,
Neymar deal
if you,
really did break the
yeah,
transfer market, didn't
that
it?
Neymar deal just fucked up everything. And if you want to,
Yeah.
if that's what you want to, if that's the approach that you want to take, then you might as well inflate the entire transfer market.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think it did essentially. I think it broke the entire
Yeah.
transfer window.
because then you're setting unrealistic valuations for every player out there, which just isn't worth it in my opinion. So yeah.
I think one
Just
thing on the
calm
Sancho
down.
deal, though, that's fairly significant is that all the negative journalists from last season are tweeting positive tweets, as in, Fjortov, Berger, saying we're edging closer. So that's one thing to be positive about.
Yeah, for sure. I won't ask you for predictions this time. We'll just move straight on. So do make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching on there, and give us a like. Follow us on Twitter or any other podcast platform that you're watching on or listening on. And yeah, it's been good. So we'll see you again soon next week.